with all due respect to Mary Morgan, we're big fans, but she is young. She's 24. She's 24, right? Anyway, yes. Host of Pop Culture Crisis, shout out. And she said she's in the nothing ever happens camp. And I was just like, I thought about that. When Donald Trump descended from that escalator, something happened. Mm-hmm. And for most of us, we're all older. You guys are older than me. It was like, holy crap, what? Like nothing happening is politician in suit argues with politician in suit. The joke that Futurama made was what Jim Johnson and John Jimson or whatever, clones of each other, were debating, but they agreed on everything. That's how people in the 2000s viewed politics. Nothing ever happened. And then Trump stepped up. Something happened. Trump was accused of being a Russian spy. Trump was impeached twice. There was scandal after scandal after scandal. The media wouldn't shut up. And Mary says nothing ever happens. I'm like, that's because Mary was 14 when Trump descended that escalator. For her entire adult life, she has been living in the heat, in the fray of this stuff happening.
So much stuff.
It's relative.
Yeah.
So what we're looking at now, it is remarkable to me when I talk to someone and say, you really don't think a civil war is possible? No, it's not possible. And I'm like, after everything that's happened, it's like I'm still talking to people and it's like, did you see the bullet graze the head of the president? And they're like, I don't know. People live in the moment. And what happens is if things get too hot too quick, people freak out. But if things are just getting hotter very slowly, people adapt. It's boiling frogs, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing, too, I've been thinking about as we have the release of the JFK files, and Trump has also promised Martin Luther King Jr. files, Bobby Kennedy assassination files. And I was thinking about how that was an assassination era. I was thinking about my mom. My parents lived through this period of time when the president got assassinated. One of the nation's top civic leaders got assassinated. The brother of the
Wasn't it two of them?
President got assassinated. Yeah, it was MLK, RFK, and JFK. Mm-hmm. And they just all got assassinated. I mean, living
Malcolm
through
X.
that time. Yeah, Malcolm X got assassinated. Right. Yeah. Yeah. How do I forget about Malcolm X? I just remember the zoot suits from that Malcolm X movie. Yep. But yeah, I mean, this was a lot of assassinations
that we're talking
about. A lot of that, a lot of assassinations. And there was no, you could say there was no civil war, but there was certainly a massive uprising. There were massive social unrest, civil strife, for sure. I mean, you had people got shot at universities, shot to death at Kent State.
Crazy.
You had, you had civil rights activists getting murdered all through the South, white civil rights activists, black civil rights activists. You had lynchings. You had Emmett Till, which was a crazy.
Was that in the 60s?
Wasn't it? It was like all around that period.
That.
Was that before? Was that the 50s or was that the 60s?
Emmett Till was 55.
55. So yeah, that was early. But during that period of time, you had lynching. Certainly, it was crazy. You had KKK burning crosses.
Right. I don't know where this all goes. I'm just saying that it is worse now than it was last year. Mm-hmm. It's worse now than it was
in 2020.
Yes. When you had it depends.
Why? Because that was contained?
Well, I would say it depends on how you frame things, right? The thing about 2020 is you have this quote unquote pandemic. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. What I mean to say is quote unquote pandemic lockdown, the systems of governance where they said we're going to mandate all these different policies. I believe there was a pandemic. I'm arguing from the government side. That led to people protesting en masse across the country and some of the worst riots we've seen in a long time. The reason why I say it's worse now is that riots are riots, and you lock people in their homes for several months and their brains are going to boil and you're going to get riots, and riots sometimes happen, and those riots were bad. What we're looking at is 2 assassination attempts on the front runner for the presidency who eventually won, a bullet that grazed his head, and now terroristic targeting of not just Tesla dealerships, but I think we're looking at almost 20 prominent personalities in media supporting the president have been targeted with swatting calls. Mm-hmm. In the summer of love, the government...
You also had the assassination of a healthcare executive.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. In the summer of love,
Two
you
of
had...
them, right?
2 of them?
There was a lower level one attempted.
That was
attempted. That's right.
Like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oregon.
So in 2020, you had riots, and they were really bad. And then in Seattle and stuff, you got the autonomous zones, really crazy. Today, you are getting leftists directly targeting perceived political opponents. Mm-hmm. So riots in general are people running around screaming, smashing things. That's their own cities. I was talking to somebody and I was debating civil war with them. And it was on the show. I can't remember what show it was. It was probably last year. And they said, that's insane. I go outside. Nobody's talking about civil war, right? Who do you think is going to fight a civil war? If I go outside, nobody cares. And I said, do you think people in 1862 in Atlanta walked out of their houses, looked at their neighbor and said, are you a Yank? I'll fight you. No, they were all Southerners. They walked outside and said, who's talking about civil war? The fight was on the front lines in Pennsylvania or in Maryland, in West Virginia. It wasn't in next door.
Well, or with
people don't understand that when we are talking about escalation of civil war, whether it could happen, I don't know. I'm not saying it will. The difference between 5 years ago and today is the direct targeting of political opponents with extreme violence and attempted murder.
Well, and you also have for decades, well, maybe not decades, but you certainly have for years, the Democrat politicians calling for this very thing. You had Maxine Waters during the first Trump administration saying, call out Trump officials where you see them. Sarah Sanders was forced out of a Waffle House at one point. You had, what was it? Hakeem Jeffries was recently talking about, we're going to take this fight to the streets. Yep. You have a lot, like that's a standard rhetorical practice of Democrats, is that we're going to have street violence.
Also, everyone forgets about the attempted assassination of multiple Republican members of Congress with the Alexandria baseball shooting.
Right.
Yeah.
In the Supreme Court, there was a guy who went to kill Brett Kavanaugh.
Right. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.